Okay, let's continue our trigger by giving an example of creating logging records automatically. So let's break down this SQL code into a step by step, and this code will go into create a table and a trigger that logs each time a user logs in the database of Oracle, right? So perhaps we now seeing the creating the log table or log underscore table, and as per the codes mentioned there, this definitely will create the table of log underscore table in the current schema what you're working, whichever you're working with, and a column are been defined here that the user ID or underscore ID as a varchar 2 data type with the size of 30 will be stored in the user ID who logs in the database. And perhaps we need also the login date or log on underscore date, which is a date data type, and this column will definitely store the date and time when the user logs in, and the type of this will going to be, or the date type will be stored both date and time information. So we probably just like we're capturing the timestamp of a year, right? So of course the second part here is creating an object of our trigger, which is log on underscore trig, and definitely this is going to be a trigger with the same name already exists, will going to be replaced because of the clause replaced there. But otherwise, if a new name without any the same object, of course it won't be having any problem, right? So no replacement will gonna be there. So once that it's there's no duplicate of this trigger name. Okay, so this will going to have an after log on database, meaning it's going to define the triggering event for the trigger. In this case, it will going to specify the trigger will fire after any user logs on to the database, right? That's why we have here the trigger body that you will see with the begin and end clause, which means this keyword defines an execution block now. So within this block of trigger, the code inside this block will going to be execute, and definitely every time the trigger fired and every time the log user logs will be inserted into the database, a new row will going to be inserted. Definitely this block will be going to be triggered or fired, right? So this insert into log underscore table, which is our table name itself, is basically a statement that will add new record, right? Which is this each time the trigger fires, a new row will be contains the user ID, and that the ID of the user who has been logged in, and the user keyword retrieves the current Oracle database username. And this is basically based on the what do you call this one, the active session, and whoever actively log in, that will be taken as a database username, right? And the log on here, which will be the current date and time, we will take it on PL SQL function, which is assistDate, where in fact this is an Oracle function that will returns the current date and time on the system. So you see, if going to execute this one using our Oracle Apex Application Express, or one of our activity, the trigger events every time the user successfully logins to the database, the triggers fires. Each triggers action, either it will go into insert new record into the log table, which is the log underscore table with the user underscore ID, and log on underscore date, right? So this will be going to be a return username respectively with the person who log in the database, and the current timestamp of the database, or as using assist date. So that's why we'll be having this first example later on, and probably your login to your outcome for this one. Example, if someone is using the Scott user ID, and pretty much like a timestamp of a login date of will be mentioned with the date specified, maybe like a short date, starting with the date, day, a month, year, followed by a time, right? And it will mention there, and it will going to be executed every time the log table after triggers execute. Right, so we know already the key concept of this one, especially that the user are basically will be the Oracle function returns to current database user, such as we can use the login user Scott user or anything that you have created on your database management system or the BMS. Assist date definitely will Oracle function that will going to return the time for the database server, and after logging on the database, this type of trigger fires after the user's logins in the database. So all the system level trigger, meaning it doesn't depend on the specific table, but it triggers on the event of a user login into the database itself. Okay, so probably we can use this one as a case of a trigger, or probably like an auditing, logging, monitoring, and so we can do some consideration for this one as well. Perhaps you might be working along with the performance non-functionality of your development or security, or probably a cleanup over time to accumulate many rows or tuples, many records that might be produced periodically, right? So doing some archive is or backup that might be remain as a part of the productions. So of course our final thought that when we were going to execute this example, this trigger is a very simple yet very powerful later. This mechanism will go to log only from the database whenever we're logging in, and which can be crucial for auditing or even monitoring or even debugging. And it's a good example how the system level triggers work in Oracle to capture such activity outside the direct data manipulation, like insert, update, delete. Okay, so we could move on to the next example, probably for enforcing a complex data integrity rules. Right, see you once again to our next slide.